Okay, we are recording, guys. Awesome, guys. Put your name in the chat if you didn't put your name in the chat yet. Get your name in the chat, name in the chat. Open up your videos if you can so we can see you. No pressure, but put them on. Like, why not? Check out that Iron Dome shot over there. Awesome. Or maybe it's my spaceship. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, guys, welcome to Topics in Torah. Welcome to Parasha. Okay, the idea of this class, this is the level 1 Parasha class. There's another class that normally is offered at the exact same time, Professor Tzvi Shimon's. If anybody had tried out his class, that normally goes against my time when we're in person in Israel. So for now, you can try out both classes and enjoy them both. But in general, this is the level 1, that's the level 2. Okay, what are we going to do in this class? First off, this is Parasha. This is Topics in Torah. Here's our goal for the class. Our goal is we want to cover the weekly Torah portion. We want to try to get to those parashiyot. We want to actually know what the Torah says. Okay, you're going to have a lot of classes here at Bar Ilan. I hope you've been enjoying some of your other classes that are very philosophy-based, theology. They're going to talk about big ideas. So this class is much more about what does the actual Torah say? We're Jews. We have a Torah. What does our Torah say? What's actually going on in the parashiyot? Let me ask you, how many of you guys have had a parsha class in the last couple of years? Like a weekly one. We've really gone like in depth what the parsha is talking about of the week. Okay, good. But 3 of you. Good. So the vast majority have not. And I even find those that have had the parsha classes, sometimes those parsha classes tend to be like the same classes you've been learning since like 2nd grade, and not necessarily the level of depth hasn't gone up as much. Now, hopefully maybe your high schools or your Sunday schools, your Chabad houses, or wherever you've been going to has given some a little bit higher level stuff. But the idea of this class is we actually want to know what the Torah says. Not what we think the Torah says, not like Jewish talking points that we have nowadays, but rather, what does it actually say in the Torah? Let's actually try to know something. I'll give you guys an example. Who here, without Google searching, knows the 10 Commandments? We got 1, we got 2. A little bit. Okay, let's try. Nisim, let's try. Let's see what you got. 10 Commandments.
I'm your God.
Okay, good.
There's no other God. Keep Shabbat. Don't kill. Don't envy.
Good, we're halfway there.
Don't lie.
No, don't lie, not really.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was like
It's
don't
a
lie
good
in
rule,
court.
though. We like that. Midvar sheker tirchak. We have halachot. It's part of the 613. Okay, we got 5. Anybody else got the other 5?
Don't commit adultery.
No adultery.
Don't take God's name in vain.
God's name in vain. Okay, very good.
Tabed et ima v'ava. Or
Love the
Ibav.
parents. Good.
Don't
Kidnap. Good.
bear false witness.
And false witness. God, you got to snap it up. Good team effort. Good team effort. Now, here's the big thing. How many of you next year are planning to go to secular universities somewhere in America, Canada, or England, or somewhere? Okay, good. So I went to University of Florida. Pretty big campus, actually one of the few pro-Israel campuses right now. Go kol hakavod to the president of UF for his awesome statement for the state of Israel. Snap it up, snap it up. University of Florida. It was large school back then, like 40,000 students. Very strong Christian groups over there, very pro-Israel Christian groups. They expect every Jew to know the 10 Commandments. They expect us as Jews to know the most basics of what the Torah says. And the sad part is, when I was there, it was around 6,000 Jewish students on campus. And I'd say there might have been, if we're really estimating high, 20 students out of the 6,000 students who could actually name the 10 Commandments easily. And it's interesting because if you went to the other, 44,000, let's say go to the other 35,000 Christians on that campus, a good percentage of them, it's the South over there, a little bit more of the Bible Belt area, up at North Gainesville, they knew it. They knew what it said. The goal, I think, for our class a little bit is to know what the Torah actually says, so we can be knowledgeable. We can say, oh, this is what the Torah says. Awesome. The next idea is we want to try to approach the Torah with more adult eyes. So we're going to try to relearn some of the stories. We're gonna relearn them, not necessarily as politically correct as you might have learned them a couple of when you guys were younger. And if you haven't learned them yet, it's actually the best way to learn it now as an adult, because you can actually approach it as an adult. Because the Torah was really written for an adult. It's interesting. There's the Lubavitcher Rebbe writes that Rashi wrote his commentary for a 5-year-old so that a 5-year-old could begin to understand the Torah. But the actual Torah deals with ideas and concepts that are for an adult. So B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to try to have adult eyes when we learn the Torah. We're going to focus primarily on the Rishonim, the way they learn it. And of course, we're going to go through Rashi. Everybody heard of Rashi? Or Shlomo Yitzchaki? Rashi, late 1000s, early 1100s. He's the main commentary on the Torah. We're going to bring him down for everything, because you know what? If anybody ever says to you, oh, what's that famous Rashi on the Torah? You should know every single Rashi is famous, because Rashi is the famous commentary on the Torah. So everything he says is famous. So if anybody ever says famous Rashi, that's every Rashi. Doesn't really mean anything. But so we're going to go with Rashi, but also I want to take a step away from Rashi, because I feel like that might be what some of you might have heard growing up. And let's look at some Rambans, Nachmanides, who gives a more philosophical look at the Torah. Let's look at some Ibn Ezra's. Let's look at some more modern day commentaries. Let's look at the modern Orthodox commentaries, the Derech Eretz commentaries, the Musar commentaries, the Hasidic commentaries, the Kabbalistic commentaries, the Sephardic commentaries. Let's try to get a much deeper look at what the Torah actually has to say and give a much bigger picture. I also want you guys to ask questions. I want you guys to ask. We're going to go through stories. I'm going to drive you guys crazy like I did with you in Halacha yesterday and try to ask you guys some stuff, because I want to hear what you have to say. But especially in Parasha, Halacha, it's much harder to mechadesh halachot until you've learned a lot of Halacha and understand Jewish law. But in Parasha, when we're dealing with understanding a text, well, you guys already have literary skills. You guys already have a little of a background as Jews and world background to understand how to take things you've had from the past and apply it to the text, so we can try to understand it and get deeper. And I want you to ask some of those real questions. Okay, so we're going to look at the text. Now, in general learning of the text, we have what's called Pardes. You know what Pardes means? Pardes? Jesse, what's Pardes?
Shot, Remez, Drush, and Sod.
Good. What is Pardes literally?
A vineyard.
It's a vineyard. It's an orchard. It's actually where the word in English paradise comes from. Because we know the Garden of Eden, last week's parasha, the first part of the Torah, Adam and Eve are walking in the Garden of Eden. It's a pardes, it's a paradise. It's this beautiful garden and orchard, thinking about heavenly kind of state. That is the pardes. Learning Torah, be'ezrat Hashem, people, be'ezrat Hashem, God willing, I want you to experience the paradise of Torah. Torah is unbelievable. It's as deep as it can be, and there's something for everybody in every single aspect. We want to enter the paradise. But as Jesse said, Pardes also is an acronym. It's a siman, it's a hint to 4 different ways to learn the Torah. We have ourselves Pardes, first pei, pa. The pa is pshat, means simple understanding. Let's try to understand what actually happened in the stories before we get to deeper interpretations. A lot of times, especially when we jump to Rashi, we're going deep before we go simple. So I want to try to get like a little bit of a simple understanding. So we get the stories, we know what's going on, and we're going to have some really big story questions. Like we asked yesterday in Halakha class, how could Jacob marry 2 sisters? That's like a big question to ask, just like philosophically, like how could you do something like that to deal with like simple understandings? Now, those that went to like really modern Orthodox, like, Yeki kind of high schools, if you know what I'm talking about, you probably spent a lot of time on the simple interpretation. Those that went to a little bit more, I don't know, a little more Hasidic styles or more open kind of styles, more that, you probably spent less time on that. But we will spend a certain amount of time understanding just simply what does it mean. Then we have, so that's the first level. Then we have remez. Remez are hints. We're going to have hints. We're going to have numerology involved over here. Every letter symbolizes something. Today, Be'ezrat Hashem, I'm going to want to start with Bereshit. Bereshit, we're going to start with the letter Bet. So we're going to have a little bit more hints. We said a little bit in yesterday's class in Halacha, but now I want to get more into it. A little bit of the remez, the ramazim that are in the Bet of Bereshit. Then we have ourselves, Pshat remez. Daled is drush. Drush means midrash. What are the midrashim? Guys, midrashim, what are they? You guys heard of the word drash, midrashim? The midrash? What's a midrash? Evan, what's a midrash? Ever heard of a midrash?
Story.
Stories. Where do the stories come from?
The Torah. It's
Torah,
their
where in the Torah?
interpretation.
When was it written? Moses wrote down the midrashim?
No.
No, he didn't. It's
No,
people's
Charlie, who wrote down the midrashim?
interpretations.
Huh?
The rabbis, the chachamim, right?
The Chachamim, the rabbis. really, Midrashim were written for about 1,000 years. They were written around the times of the Gemara, maybe even the Mishnah, but they were written all the way up to the times of Rashi and even after Rashi. And a couple hundred years ago, when the Kabbalah became more popular, Kabbalistic Midrashim have been written 300 years ago, 200 years ago. So Midrashim are always being written. But what is a Midrash? A Midrash is one of two things. Either we have old school traditions that fill in the blanks to the storyline, or people paid very close attention to the text. They looked very close what the Torah has to say, and they looked at every extra letter, every extra word. And if they could find anything that looks interesting, that looks different, that is a question, why is that there? They developed the storyline underneath it to try to explain why it's there. Okay, big question. Midrashim, these stories, we take them literally? Huh?
No.
No.
Who here was taught the stories? Okay, so you guys all say no. Anybody was taught the stories literally? So everybody says don't take them literally. So actually the Rambam, Maimonides disagrees with you. The Rambam writes, if you take them all literally, you're a fool. But if you take none of them literally, you're also a fool. Okay, I don't really know what that means, but it means it's somewhere in the middle. Or really what it's saying is, yeah, there's partial truth to it, and there's partial history to it. But the ideas that are being taught, those are so much more important, because the ideas or the feelings that are coming out of those stories, that really was true. That really is what happened. Did it happen the exact way, the exact word? That's already a matter of debate. Some will say no way. It's all supposed to be analogies. Others will say no, for sure. There's truth to it as well. Or some will say it's somewhere in the middle, depending on the actual story. Okay, fine. And then the final part is the sod, the secrets of the Torah. Bezrat Hashem, maybe we'll do a little bit of sod too in this class. Maybe we'll start, tap into a little bit of maybe. Anybody know what the Zohar is? Zohar. You guys heard of the Zohar?
Writer.
Huh?
He's a writer. Mefarish.
No. Writer's not. No. That's not what the Zohar is. You know what the Zohar is? It's not a writer. You know what the Zohar is?
Isn't it a book like mysticism?
It's a book of mysticism. It's a book of Kabbalah. It's the main book of Kabbalah, attributed. It's attributed religiously to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of the early writers of the Mishnah that was in the cave with the fire, a mystical figure in the Mishnah. It's attributed to him mystically. Academics attribute it to a later time in history, but it's a mystical commentary on the Torah, meaning the Zohar goes parsha by parsha by parsha and gives the sod explanation to the Torah, to the psukim. And it focuses heavily on how did God create the world? How did it actually happen? And number two, how does God still interact with the world and that's the two principles the Zohar is going to keep going through as it comments on the Torah. But really, the Zohar is a commentary. Rashi would be a midrashic commentary. His grandson, the Rashbam, is a pshat commentary. It's a simple interpretation commentary, while the Zohar would be the Kabbalistic commentary. So we're going to try to do a bit of everything, but I'd say we'll probably spend a little bit more time on the pshat and the drash, the simple reading and the midrashic reading, and I'll throw in some remazim just for the fun of it, and sod in a couple of areas a little bit later on in the semester after we get our feet a little wet. Maybe we'll bring in a little bit of sod as well, and we'll see if you guys can handle the Kabbalah or not. Anybody learn a little bit of Kabbalistic ideas? Any little mystical ideas? A little bit. Okay, those that got in a little bit late, write your name in the chat so I have you for the chat. Those that are watching us online afterwards because of time zone issues, send me a WhatsApp message that says the word Pardes, Pardes, Pardes. WhatsApp me that if you're listening online tomorrow. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the logistics of the class. A little bit about logistics. Hold on. Okay. Okay, guys, a little bit about the class itself. So let's start. So, as we said, we're going to go through the parasha, try to go through it. Let's talk about grading for a second. How do we grade? Similar to my other classes that I teach, I do the same thing in all my classes. 30% is like attendance and participation. Of course, we're going to be more easy going with the whole Zoom world. Don't worry about it. We'll figure that part out. So that 30% is a little bit easier to work with. I do extra credits and stuff like that as well in all my classes. So you don't have to worry about that. 70% is the final. The final will be based off of these lectures. I might make a little bit while we're, as long as we're on Zoom, I might make a couple of these pages to have like a little bit extra sheets on the side. But for the most part, it's based on the lectures. I'll do a review and review questions before the final. It's not going to be hard. It's just to actually know what the stuff says. Okay. So 70% final, 30% is attendance and participation. Let's start now with the first pasuk in the Torah. First pasuk. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning. Okay, this week's parasha is Parashat Noah. We're on the second parasha of the Torah. It's about the flood story. It's about humanity. God tries once. We all mess up. God destroys the world. Starts over with Noah. We still don't have Jews. At the end of the parasha, we're going to begin to meet Avraham or Avram before his name is changed. And then next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to have Lech Lecha, the real parasha of the Jewish people. So the Jewish people really starts in next week's parasha. This week's parasha, Noach, is the flood. I want to go back. It's our first class. I want to go back to last week's parasha. We're going to skip basically Noach. Maybe if we have time today, we'll do a little bit of Noach, but probably not. But I want to just start with a little bit of the creation of the world, a little bit about what the Torah is all about. And let's go back to creation. Now, you should know, the very first parasha of the Torah is probably the hardest parasha in the whole Torah because it deals with creation and the words, the pardes that we spoke about goes crazy. Every layer is involved. Here, the academics and the scientists want to get involved as well and try to understand the Torah from every single angle. We're not going to go through that because you can spend a whole, actually in level 2. Okay, this is the beginner's class on Parasha. We want to go through everything. It's called Bekiut. We want to cover a lot of ground. Again, if I say any Hebrew words you don't get, just be like, Rabbi Alo, unmute yourself, translate and translate. We do what's called in this class Bekiut. Bekiut means we want to cover ground. We want to talk about everything, go through as much as possible, download as much Torah into your brains and into your hearts so you actually know what the Torah says. You can be knowledgeable Jews. That's the point of this class. In level 2, that's Professor Tzvi Shimon's class, he's going to take a section. He's actually going to deal with the creation of the world. And he's going to go in depth on the creation of the world, and he'll spend on one verse, maybe a whole class, maybe 2 classes, going from angle to angle to try to explain in depth. It's called Iyun. It's the depth of the Torah. Try to get your minds working, your brains, your philosophy, and try to get really deep. What I want to do in this class is if he'll take a whole class on one deep idea, I want to take that one deep idea and then cliff note it and give it to you in the course of 1 minute, and then give you another 45 deep ideas, and then try to give you a lot of those ideas all in one shot. That's the point of this class. So you see the difference in what we're trying to do. So therefore, I'm not going to spend as much time on creation. I'm going to spend about, 20 minutes right now on creation at the beginning of the Torah. And then after that, we're done and we're moving on to next week's parasha, because next week, Lech Lecha, we have a lot to cover. This week, we're taking it easy and only covering very little. So we're actually going to spend a
Can we
little
not take both classes?
For now, you can try out both. When we meet in person, I think my class is against his. So what if there's enough people that want to do both, maybe Rabbi Khan come up with some kind of solution to that. But as of now, we normally go up against each other. So for now, anyways, it's drop ad period. If you're enjoying the other class, take us both for now, and then you can make a choice a little bit later on which one you're going to go with. But normally we do, me and Professor Shimon, we are up against each other the same slot in normal times. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the creation of the world. Bereshit. What does Bereshit mean?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. It's actually fascinating. There's a great app. It's also on a website, Sefaria. Sefaria is an unbelievable website because it gives you thousands and thousands of Torah books online for free, with English translations for a lot of the books on there. It's unbelievable. So what I took today, I cut and pasted a little bit from their website because it's the most easy to cut and paste from. Now, I have other things you can work on. There's Ala Torah with Bar Ilan. You're all Bar Ilan students. You can have logins. You can enter a whole library of Otsar and Shoot Bar Ilan. There's all these online things you have access to now that has things. But it's interesting that the word Bereshit, nobody really knows how to translate. And I actually like this one. They wrote over here, when. I've actually never seen that before. I've seen in the beginning, as the beginning created, but this I think interesting, simple English here. When God began to create. Okay, Bereshit. Reshit means the beginning, or the initial. There's actually probably 6 ways to learn the word Reshit and how it works out, but we're gonna go simple. In the beginning, like Jonah said, I like it. In the beginning, God created. Now, really, what's the famous question? I should have said, Elohim bara Bereshit. That God created in the beginning. And here's where the Kabbalists come along and they say, no. in the beginning, God created the ideas of God for us. So that's also why it gets a little more complicated, but we're not going to go in that direction. Bereshit bara Hashem. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Heavens here, most learn as not being physical heavens, because we're going to learn about the physical heavens in more detail on the later days, but really it's referring to spiritual and physical. Okay, guys, let's do a little midrash. Bereshit, bet. If you open up a Sefer Torah, the letter bet is bigger. It's bigger than the rest of the letters. Why does the Torah start with the letter bet? I said a little bit yesterday in halakha class, but now I want to come at it from a different angle. Why does it say the letter? Why do we start the Torah with the letter bet?
Is it because Hashem pre-exists the creation?
Okay, how does the letter bet prove that?
Because it should start with Aleph. If it was...
Oh, good. So that's the question. That's the question brought down in the midrash. We know the first letter in the Torah is an Aleph. So if the first letter is an Aleph, why wouldn't we start the Torah with an Aleph? How does that relate to? But Jonah, let's take a little step further. How does that relate to what you said about that God predates it?
In what aspect? What do you mean?
And you said, so why does not starting with an Aleph, how does that even relate to God? How does Aleph and God relate to each other?
Elohim. Aleph.
Okay, good. So Aleph could be the Aleph of Elohim, good, of God's name, good. Aleph also, it comes from the language of Alufo Shel Olam. Aleph is Elef, Aluf. Aluf means the great one. If you're listening to Israeli news right now, you're hearing about all the generals, the Alufim. So God is the ultimate general of the word. Aleph, Aluf also symbolizes that as well. The other way is through the remez. Aleph means one. Aleph is one. And what do we know about God? God is the ultimate one. The best. What's the big Jewish statement? Izzy, the big Jewish statement. What do every Jew say?
Like
Hashem Echad.
We say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We say God is one. That's the monotheism. That's the Jewish statement. We have one God. God is one. All the oneness that's a little deeper emanates from God. God is all that one. Oneness is God. The rest of the world, creation, is symbolized by two. God is one above. God is everything. God is this big oneness. And what comes after that? Two. We have a creation. We now exist. In Kabbalistic ideas, God contracts himself, makes space for us, makes space for an other. Or maybe get a little deeper, make space for an other within God. Okay, that's already a question about philosophy and theology. But this concept of two is the creation of the world. Aleph is one. What's the second letter?
Bet.
Bet. What's Aleph and Bet together? We have ourselves an Av. We have ourselves an Abba. From the Aleph, from the one, you have a number two, a Bet, and now you have an Abba. You have Avinu Shebashamayim, you have our God in heaven. So we have God is the one, is the original, and then we have the Bet. So why are we not starting with an Aleph? Because Aleph goes to God. Oneness goes to God. That's something we can't fully grasp. We can't do. We live in a world of separation. We have all of our molecules, all of our existence of all that we are. We're in the world where there's differences. God is the level before. There's only oneness. The Aleph goes to God. Now, if you notice, what we said now is some big stuff. This is a midrash, though, that I could teach my 6-year-old daughter. When we speak about Aleph was upset, what about me? We start with Bet because Aleph goes to God. For a kid, the midrash has one layer of understanding. For an adult, that same midrash can now teach you much deeper ideas of what is the world and what is godliness. Okay, so Aleph is one, Aleph is God, Bet is two. What else do we know about the Bet? The Bet looks like this, right? Kind of like a C thing over here. What does the Bet look like? If you look on top of the Bet, before the Bet, underneath the Bet, that's not where it exists. It opens up like a Pac-Man going this way, which the idea is God created the world. We can never, ever fully understand what was above, before, underneath. We can't understand pre-creation. It's only from the Bet and the way that it opens up. That's the world we could understand. That's what we live in. That's what our brains can do. We could try to get a little bit of a hint to what happens before. Try to make, but no, it's not really going to work. We could really only fully understand everything from the nature of the world that we live in after the Bet opened up. Okay. Fine. That's the Aleph, that's the Bet. They also tell us that the Aleph, this thing we did mention yesterday, that the Aleph also goes to the first commandment, Anochi Hashem. It goes to the fact that the Torah itself will start with an Aleph in the first of the commandments. It also hints to the idea, the Bet also hints to the 2,000 years of Torah that predated the world. Okay, let's keep going. Comes along Rashi. Now this Rashi, I know I normally don't do, but I think it's actually very important, this Rashi, because of what's going on in Israel today. Because of the war that we're in right now, with all the rocket attacks, everything that's happening right now in Israel. I think this Rashi, it's the first Rashi in the Torah, is actually really, really important. Okay, guys, how are you guys Show of hands. Okay, show of hands over here. Do I read it in Hebrew and translate, or do I just jump straight to the English? If I read it in Hebrew and I translate the Hebrew, raise your hand. Read it straight in the English to start with, raise your hand. Okay, great. I have 2 votes against nobody. Not the best voting record over here, but that's fine. We'll go with we'll go with the English. We'll start with the English. Okay. Says Rashi. In the beginning, Bereshit. Rabbi Yitzchak said Rabbi Isaac, the Torah, which, now they give me a little commentary, the Torah, which is known as the law book of Israel, like our class yesterday, the Torah's halakha. Isn't it all about halachot? So we said yesterday, no, it's not just halachot, it's philosophy too. But Rashi now, Rabbi Yitzchak, this Rabbi Yitzchak that he's quoting is saying the Torah, it's primarily, he writes, this Rabbi Yitzchak, it's not Rashi, this Rabbi Yitzchak, it's different Rabbi Yitzchak, even though Rashi's name is also Yitzchaki, but he's quoting a Rabbi Yitzchak, an older rabbi. Rabbi Yitzchak says the Torah is a book of laws. So doesn't it make sense? Rabbi Isaac said the Torah should have commenced with the verse, the month shall be unto the first of the month. It says Rabbi Yitzchak, if we fast forward the Torah to the second book of the Torah, Shemot, we're going to get to a pasuk, a verse that talks about the first month. The first month is the first commandment given to the Jewish people. If the Torah is a book of laws, shouldn't the Torah start with laws? Why do we have a whole book and 2 parshas, all of Bereshit and the very beginning of Shemot? Why do we have a book and two parshas that talk about stories? What's with the stories? What's with the stories of the Jewish people, where we come from? Why do we have all that kind of stuff? Let's just start with laws, because the Torah is a law book. That's like the given of Rabbi Yitzchak, that's a law book. So what is the reason? What is the reason then that it commences with the account of creation? Why does it start with the Bereshit? Anybody have an answer? Before we read his answer. Anybody ever have an answer to that? Before we read his answer. He's asking, why are we starting with the creation and the stories if the Torah is a book of laws? Start with laws.
It's like, because you need to know where the laws come from, I guess.
Oh, okay, good. Izzy, say a little bit more.
Like, if there's just laws but no story on creation, then I feel like that could cause some confusion. Like, why would I believe in this if I don't even know where it comes from?
Excellent. Let's get. I think it's excellent. Rabbeinu Bachye is a different commentary in the Torah. He's going to go in a very different angle than Rashi. Go more in Izzy's direction. He's like, wait a second. What do you mean? You're telling me right now that I have to keep the Torah, but like, why? What's it all about? Now, maybe Rashi would argue back. No. You know Mount Sinai happened, so therefore you don't have to go back that far. But Rabbeinu Bachye is like, wait a second. But let's get context to where we are. And then he takes it a step further. He says, you know what else? You know what we learn about in the first book in 2 parshas? All about how God created the world, what God is all about. Says Rabbeinu Bachye, why do we keep the laws? Do we just worship laws because they're laws? Do we just do it because God said so? So yeah, that's one aspect. But if we can understand what is God, why we worship God, what is God all about? What's our purpose in life? Why are we here? Why did God give us laws in the first place? So a little bit about context, like Izzy's saying, and also about meaning and purpose. Let's understand what God is all about, what the world is all about. And once we understand that, then we're going to want to keep the laws. Then we're going to say, oh, this is the best thing for me, and this is what I'm going to want to do. So that's how Rabbeinu Bachye answered this question. Totally different than what Rashi says. Rashi gives a very Zionist answer. Rashi gives a very Israel-centric answer. Says Rashi. And it's interesting because what was going on in actually in Rabbi Yitzchak's generation, Rashi is quoting an older commentary in the Gemara days. What was going on in Rabbi Yitzchak's generation that Rabbi Yitzchak felt that he had to say this? But says Rabbi Yitzchak, why do we start with the whole history of the world? So he quotes a pasuk in Tehillim that says we should know the strength of his works. We should know we should understand what God did in order that he might give them the heritage of the nations. Okay, let's explain. For should the peoples of the world say to Israel, let's say all the non-Jews of the world say, you are robbers because you took by force the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan. Why do we have to know the whole creation of the world? Because in the future, the non-Jews are going to come up to us and say, the land is not yours. You stole it. You stole the land. You're colonizers. You are European colonizers who came to Israel and took over this land. What are we going to answer? Israel might reply to them, all the earth belongs to the Holy One. Blessed be He. Everything is God's. He created it, and He gave it to whom He pleased. When He willed it, He gave it to them. And when he willed it, he took it from them and gave it to us. Says Rashi, it's coming from the Midrash, Yakut Shimoni, it's to be able to have an answer and say, oh, you know why we are where we are? You know why we're in Israel? You know we have a right to be where we are right now? Because God's in charge and God gave it to us. Now, some of the other commentators ask on Rashi, they say, but are the non-Jews going to care about this? Do the non-Jews really care what the Torah says? So maybe. The Christians might, if they're religious Christians and believe in an Old Testament, they might see something. We have certain evangelicals who are behind us. The Muslims in different centuries might have accepted that too, because they do see us as the people of the book, even though they rewrite history a little bit. But so maybe a little bit. But the average atheist, the average agnostic today, does he care whatsoever what the Torah actually says that God gave it to us? Does he care about God? Like, why is this a good thing? So he says that, so they answered this question on Rashi. It's not for them. It's for us. It's for us to know. We have to be so clear that we're not stealing this land, that we're supposed to be here, that Israel is ours. It's our homeland given to us by God who created the world. That's the very first Rashi on the Torah. Okay. Questions, ideas, anything? People have heard that Rashi before? It's pretty, I guess that every Rashi is famous. You guys have heard that Rashi before? Some of you? A little bit? Fine. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. So God creates the world. The greatest miracle of the world is that God creates a physical, creates space for a physical, creates space for where we are, and he's going to go through day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, creates all the different parts of creation. And if you read those verses, we're not going to go into it today. It just details. God creates. At the end of the day, he looks around, except for day 2 on Monday, where he wasn't so happy. There was a little bit of machloket. But normally he looks around, Vayar. He says, oh, this is pretty good. Kitov, it's good. And that's the end of the day. Until eventually we get to day number 6. And on day number 6, something different happens. God begins by creating the animals. And after that, he takes a pause from creation. So we had verse after verse after verse where God talks about creating the world. Beautiful, excellent. And then God pauses. And he has a conversation. Vayomer Elohim. And God says, Na'aseh Adam. Let us make mankind. Let us make humanity. Betzalmeinu kidmutenu. In our image, in our likeness. V'yirdu b'dgatayam. And they're going to rule over the fish. U'be'opa shamayim and the birds. U'ba'behema b'chol ha'aretz. And they're going to rule over the land. God said, I just created this big world, this entire world. You know what? Now, though, I want to make something much bigger. He pauses to talk about the next step. If you're going to pause to talk about the next thing, it must be pretty important. So God says, let's create man. And let's make this man the ruler over everything that I've created down below up until now. And this could be the greatest creation of anything, because what is man? Man is the spiritual and the physical put together. And by being physical and spiritual put together, we're now created with free will. We can make choices. This is the greatest creation of the world. Okay. What's the famous question? I put it in bold in the Hebrew. God says, Vayomer Elohim na'aseh Adam, let us make man. What's weird about that?
It's making it sound like multiple creators.
Beautiful. Why is it in plural? The famous Rashi question. Why is it in plural? We'll get to Rashi in a second, but we also want to get to other interpretations. Why is God, who in the world is God talking to? Let us make man. Like, we're going to do it together. You know, if you're a polytheist, you know, if you're like an idol worshiper, like, you're probably salivating right now. If any polytheists in the room over here, anybody that worships many gods, if you worship many gods, this would be like, whoa, oh my God, this is awesome. Look at this. The Torah speaks about polytheism. Unbelievable. You know, that's like, and more atheists in the room, you know, but then the polytheists like, wow, this is crazy. Look at this plurality. That's the question. Okay. So we'll start with Rashi because it's the most famous, and I'm assuming you probably heard it before. So it'll make you feel good if you've heard it before and you learned it in the past. If you haven't learned it in the past, how does Rashi answer it? So Rashi says, God knows that the polytheists might have questions on this. They might get excited by this. But the very next verse is written in the singular. The very next verse, God says, Vayivra Elohim, and God created Betzalmo in his image. So from the very next verse, it's very clear that only God created, that only God has the power. And God is speaking to somebody else in the verse before, but he's the one that's actually doing the creating. So it's very clear there's not other gods. And anybody who has any questions, the polytheists in the world, read the very next verse. And if you can't understand the very next verse, then, you're a little bit agenda driven. But why would God write it in a way that it could be misinterpreted until you get to the next verse? Although you do learn a very big thing from here, that sometimes to learn the Torah, you have to read more. You have to know more. And if you don't go to the next verse, you can spend so much time on one verse asking crazy questions and asking all these big, deep theological dilemmas. Learn a little bit more, see a little bit more, understand the biggest picture, the bigger picture. And when you see that bigger picture, you're like, oh, that's not really a question, And that's why it's very good for you guys to ask specific questions. And then we can maybe see, if we zoom out, see a bigger idea to answer that question. Okay, how does Rashi answer the question? Rashi answers humility. God wants to teach us how to be humble because God was about to create man. So he said, you know what? I've already created a bunch of other stuff until now. Actually, God created everything else before man. There'll be a couple of miraculous things that'll be created right before the sun sets, but almost everything was created before man. Man is one of the last creations. One of the things that God created was angels. And God said, you know what? The angels might get jealous. The angels might get mad. So out of humility, what does a good boss do? He calls together his vice president and his assistant directors, and he calls together the whole board. And even though God kind of already made up his mind, but let's have a conversation. Let's discuss it. Let's talk it out. And we actually have midrashim we're not going to talk about angels who fought it out, with some angels being like, no, this is a bad idea. They're going to mess up too much. They're going to sin too much. Don't create. And other angels are going to say, no, you should create. There's going to be this whole fight going on in that, in the boardroom. A fight. Do we create man? Do we not create man? But God wanted to give a little bit of honor to the people under him because they might get jealous. Any idea, guys? Why would an angel get jealous of man?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Why would an angel be jealous? Meaning God wants to warn the angels, give us the heads up, get the angels on board to this creation because he was worried the angels might get jealous of man.
Because they can't live in the world he made.
Okay, but they can live in the heavens. Angels are spiritual. They don't have to deal with the physical. They don't have to deal with the Yetzer Hara, with the evil inclination. The angels are a spiritual land.
Is it because man is created in the image of God?
Okay, okay. I hear it. I hear that. I hear that idea.
Maybe because angels are already at the top and the humans have the chance to move up by doing mitzvahs.
Okay, good. Judah, what do you want to say? Good.
Free choice.
Free choice. Good. Excellent. Okay, I think between Nisim, Yosef, and Judah, all three, let's take your three ideas, put it together, and I think we actually have an answer. Angels are spiritual. They're total spiritual. And that's very special. In certain ways, angels are much greater than man because they're closer to God and they're praising God and they're doing God's will and they're awesome and they're holy. But they lack one big thing. According to the standard opinion, angels don't have free will. There are some exceptions maybe here and there, but on the simple level, angels don't have free will, or they don't have the free will for sure to the level that we have. We are created as this joint, physical and spiritual, with a free will, or say a little bit bigger. We're the purpose of creation. God didn't create the world for angels to praise him. God created the world for us to have challenges and conquer those challenges. When we conquer those challenges, we can become greater than the greatest angels. We are in that image of God. We have certain aspects to become God-like, and that's unbelievable. And that can be scary for an angel, because an angel, unlike when a human being is born and an angel is created, they might be greater, but we have the potential to become greater than them. That's step by step to go up there. That's scary for an angel. We need an angel to understand that. I forgot to explain, listen, you have your role, mankind has their role, and eventually, okay, that's Rashi. Rashi is God wants to treat us humility, and we're going to see throughout the Torah, God's going to keep coming back to this idea of be humble, be humble, be humble. Being humble is considered to be one of the greatest character traits. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest Jew to live, his character trait is known as being humble. That's what he's all about. The Torah was given where? On Mount Sinai, a tinier mountain, because that's the humble mountain. Humility throughout the Torah. We're going to get to Parashat Vayikra, Balotecha, many parshas, many Torah portions. We're going to hint to be humble, be humble, be humble. If you want to make it in life, you want greatness, be humble. The more you contract yourself, that's the real God-like. You know what the creation of the world was God being humble and creating a world. So if you really want to be God-like, be humble. It's the biggest stuff you could ever be. Okay, that's Rashi. Another idea. Anybody heard a different idea for why it's written in the plural? I actually think Rashi is not the most standard or the more simple approach to this. I think it's a more simple idea. Why does God speak in the plural? Any ideas? Why would God say, let us make man? So there's another idea.
Because
Oh,
he's
yeah?
talking to man.
Oh, good. Okay, excellent. Excellent. The idea of the Gaon Mivilna, the idea of Soloveitchik, the idea of the Zohar, maybe, the idea of the Gra, maybe. You have many commentaries, a little bit more modern day commentaries, especially. Love that idea, Charlie. Who is God speaking to? To us. Let us make man. God is talking to us, which God is telling us. I created you. I gave you a body. I blew into you a soul, and I gave you free will. Now I can't decide for you. Only we could decide for ourselves. So God says, let's do a partnership. I'll make you, but now you got to make yourself. You got to be a man. You got to be a mensch. You got to step it up and be an Adam. Step it up big time. So God is speaking to us. Excellent. Good, good, good. Okay. Another idea. This, I think, actually is probably the simplest approach to it, but it gets ignored a lot. But you find it in the earlier Rishonim, you find it in Rav Saadia Gaon, you find it in some later commentators like Rav Hirsch as well. They say, why is God speaking in the plural? He's speaking in what's known as the royal we. If anybody here is British, you know what I'm talking about. But the royal we is a way of speech. It's a form of speech where you speak in a grander terms. Kings, a lot of times, especially in the old days, would speak in the royal we. We are seeing, everybody, let's all speak with each other. What are we all thinking today? And you do that in a way to show grandoseness, greatness, awesomeness, kingship, royalty. Let's speak in big. So when God says, let us make man, he's speaking big because really big things are happening. Man is being created. Rav Hirsch takes it a step further and he writes that whenever God is speaking about something that has to do with the whole world, with humanity, with the purpose of humanity, God will speak in this greater we because it involves us, it involves everything. So now we're about to create mankind. There's nothing more important for the creation of the world than creating mankind. So God says, let us make man, the royal we. It's talking about the greatness of man, the greatness of God. Okay, the greatness of man through that royal we. It also is humility. Many times teachers will speak and speak in the language of we and us. So we're all working together to come up with an interpretation. Okay, I think that's the simplest interpretation. One last idea, and then we'll probably end for today. One last idea is the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah, the Zohar, says that God is speaking to all of creation. Because man is the last of creation, God now goes to everybody and says, everybody, can you put a piece of yourself into man? Adam comes from the language of the ground, Adama. Ground, can you give the physical part to man? And it says, God goes to the lions, says to the lions, give them the roar, give them the koach, the strength to get up in the mornings and serve God. And God goes to all of creation, says, put a piece of yourself in man. And then ultimately God says, and I'm going to put a piece in man myself. And that's when he blew into us our souls. So Naaseh Adam, and this interpretation means that God says to all of creation, let's make man a part of all of creation. We're all connected in some kind of way. Science goes and has a lot of fun with this when we speak about we all have the same building blocks. And then spiritually, this will explain how we can rule over the world and also how we can affect the world in the spiritual realm as well, because we're all coming from the same exact source. Okay, I think, you know what? We'll stop here. And thank you guys. If you didn't write your name in the chat, write your name in the chat right now, guys. And awesome. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rav.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Rabbi, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
I don't understand something. If you're saying that angels don't have free will in general, right? But then you're saying that Hashem is saying that the angels might be upset with him. Doesn't that kind of contradict it? Isn't that kind of contradictory? If the angels didn't have free will, how would they? It's obviously implying that angels have emotions, and that they kind of have traits that people do. So I don't understand that.
Good. You're saying good. I like your question. Your question is going to be better than any other answer I can give you. What I could say on a simple level of an answer is that showing the emotions in the demonstrations is much more of the Midrash is teaching us an understanding of the ideas involved in what it is to create man. Meaning for us to learn that we are greater than angels, we have to learn that angels could be jealous of us being created. Whether they actually are, they actually aren't is a different question. Another angle I would say is that if you actually open up those midrashim, those stories, When it refers to the angels are known as truth versus peace. So it's much more bigger ideas of foundational values of the world. And the angels in those cases are actually values. And therefore the value is doing his job and he's fighting for his job. So kindness is fighting for kindness and truth is fighting for truth. Justice is
Kind of
fighting
like they're fighting for what they represent. Got it. That
Exactly.
makes sense. Sure.
Exactly. So
But
therefore,
that's just one interpretation.
Huh?
But you said that's one interpretation of what it means, or
Yeah.
is that just how?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more. I would also say there are certain ideas that some of the angels might actually do have some free will to them as well. And there's also could be a difference between emotions versus actions. And they don't have actions because they don't have a physical part, but they might have spiritual parts to them.
Got it. All right, that makes sense. Thank you, Rabbi. Have a wonderful day.
Awesome, you too.
Bye.